Hello and welcome back for part 2 of my ultimate guide to the One Piece card game. In the first part, we briefly touched upon the rules of the game, and I mentioned that I was planning a whole video about that. This is gonna be this one. So if you ever wanted to learn how to play the One Piece card game, this is the video for you. Now, in order to play, you're gonna need 4 things. You are of course gonna need a leader, which is gonna define some things when you play. You will need a 10 card down deck, which is going to be used as your primary energy source, and you will also need a deck of 50 cards. The last thing, which is optional, is going to be a playmat. Now, you are all used to this playmat when I open stuff on this channel, but I'm gonna flip it around because there's actually another side to this playmat with all the area for the game perfectly laid out for me to tell you everything you need to know. Of course, you can use the paper playmat that comes with any starter deck ever, but I don't have those anymore because, well, I'm simply not using them and they quickly feel a bit cramped up for me. So having a proper playmat is gonna definitely helps you have a clean board when you play. But this is not a mandatory thing. You can totally play on any surface you want, just make sure please to sleeve your cards. They do cost a fair bit of money and we don't want to ruin them. Now, the setup for any game is always gonna be the same. First, you're gonna take your leader, and today on display we have Gecko Moria from OPO 6. This is actually the deck that I made not so long ago. You can find the video in the recommendation somewhere, I think. Hold on, like, see my finger? Go all the way up there. But regardless, this is just for demonstration purposes. We're not gonna play anything. This is just to tell you guys how to play the game. So first thing first, your leader. You can place it in the designated area, but actually there's no hard ruling on placing. It just helps you have a cleaner board. But if you're looking for a place for your leader, the center of the board is gonna be perfect for him. Next, we're gonna take all Dawn cards, and I actually like this special Dawn, so I'm currently running a full Dawn deck of those. These go together face down on your Dawn deck area right here at the bottom left. Last, make sure you give a good shuffle to your deck, and you can then place your deck in his designated area again. Now, the next step is going to be to determine the initiative, meaning you determine which player is going to go first, and you do that before seeing the cards that you will have in your hands at the start of the game. So either play Shifumi, toss a coin, whatever, throw dice, just determine who goes first. Once that is done, you can then move on to setting up your hand for the start of the game. And for that, each player is going to draw 5 cards from their deck. That's my hand. Now, there is an additional step once you're there. You can look at the cards that you have in hand, and then it's gonna be up to you to decide if you want to keep these hands or not. You can do this just one, it's called a mulligan, and it consists of saying, I don't want this hand to start, I'm gonna take all the cards, throw them back into the deck, shuffle again, and draw a new hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is my new hand and I cannot change this anymore. Well, tough luck. Your cards in hand stays in your hand, but I like having this area here as sort of a resting place for my current hand, and I make sure to make it visible that this is my hand and not just some random cards just laying on the board. Once your hand is set up, there is one last thing you need to do before starting the game, and it's actually setting up your life. Please remember to set up your life. In a tournament, according to official ruling, the judge can decide that if you haven't set up any of your life and you take a single damage, you're done. Like, you lose the game, you're out. So please remember to set up your life. As I mentioned, we're running Gecko Moria, which is a solo color leader boasting 5 life. And the way you put your life is actually very specific. Back at the beginning, they didn't make any specific ruling for this, so I would just like take the amount of life from the top of my deck and just spread it just like that. So this card being the one at the top of my deck and this one being the further away the furthest away from the top of my deck, and I would just lay my life down like this. But this is not the proper way to do it according to the official ruling now. There has been an official ruling for this, and you need to go one by one, taking the first card at the top of your deck being your last life. So you repeat that as many times as your leader has life. Mine has 5, so there's the 4th one and the 5th one. So all my lives are set up. This is the top of my life and this is the bottom of my life. And now you're pretty much done. You are ready to play the game. But how do you start? Well, there is one rule you need to remember. And that's if you go first, you draw 1 Don. So you take 1 Don from your Don deck and you place it in the cost area just right next to your Don deck. And you place it vertically, which means active. Another rule when you go first is you do not get to draw a card from your deck. So all you can do for this turn is actually play a single card that is a cost of 1 from your hand on the board. We do not have any of these, so since this is the first turn of the game, I cannot deal any damage during this turn. And that is for your first turn as the first player. But what if you go second? Well, let's just go back up a second. I have no Don, I have my 5 cards in hand, my 5 life on my life, and my opponent just drew first turn and made his play, and now it is my turn. What do I do? Well, you actually take 2 Dons. And this is important. From now on, during the entire game, every player is gonna draw 2 Don from their Don deck and put them active in their cost area. As the second player also, during your first turn, you are required to draw a card from your deck. So contrary to your opponent, you start the game with 6 cards in hand. So you are the second player, you have 2 Don active, you have 6 cards in hand. You can rest 2 cards from your cost area, that's 2 Don paid, to play a 2 cost card or lower. And I'm just gonna play Cerberus. Since this is my first turn of the game and only the second turn of the game, I still cannot attack my opponent. So even though my leader is perfectly capable of dealing damage to my opponent, I cannot deal any damage during my first turn of the game. That is basically it. That is the first turn as the second player. Each player is then gonna repeat this cycle over and over again until someone wins and someone is defeated. Now, there are multiple phases in the game. Let's say that I ended my turn on this board right here. My opponent played his turn and now it's my turn. What do I do? Well, the first thing I do is the refresh phase. I'm simply gonna restand any cards that is rested in order to make my entire board active again. Then I'm gonna move on to my draw phase, which is the phase where I will draw 1 card from my deck and add it to my hand. And next is gonna be the Don phase. And remember, any turn that is not the very first turn of the game, you take 2 Don from your Don deck and you put them active in your cost area. Once that's done, I am actually gonna commence my main phase, which is the phase where everything is gonna happen. Now you do have to note that attacking in this game is not done like Magic. In Magic, you're gonna stack all the attack and resolve everything at once. Here, you can do so independently from each other. So let's say that this is the start of my main phase. I'm gonna take 2 Don, put them on Jigoro, and then attack with Jigoro for 5k on my opponent's board. He's gonna have to deal with that attack. But then I can just be crafty and say, hey, here's 4 Don, and I'm gonna play Perona. I'm activating this effect, I'm resolving it, and now I'm saying, you know what? Let's actually attack with my leader. So you can mix and match your strategy and keep your opponents guessing as to what your next move is gonna be. And since I'm talking about it, let's move on to the next subject, which is gonna be attacking and defending. So declaring an attack is actually fairly easy. You take any card that you haven't summoned during this turn and you turn it sideways to indicate that you are attacking with this card. You then specify which cards of your opponent you are attacking. Now, the only card in every board that is always targetable is the leader. no matter which state the leader is in, either active or rested, it does not matter. But for the opponent's board, his character area, you cannot attack any card that is active on the board. You can only target characters that are rested on the board. Defending though, it gets a bit more complicated. So in this instance, let's just say that my opponent is trying to make an attack on my leader and is attacking for 7k on my 5k leader. Well, my first defensive option is actually going to be to use a blocker. And a blocker is kind of Cerberus. This effect specifies that I can rest Cerberus and make this the new target of the attack. So originally my opponent had an attack coming into my Moria leader, and that attack has been redirected to Cerberus. And now that the attack has a new target, you can just simply move on to damage calculation. And when it comes to damage calculation, there is one rule you need to remember. The attacker has the advantage. Meaning that if there are an attack that is a 5k coming on a target that is a 5k, if those two values are equal, then the attacker has the advantage. The attackers win. For the hypothetical case that we have here, I specified that my opponent was making a 7k attack, which is now heading straight for my Cerberus, which is a 2k. So let's just say I do not defend Cerberus, and Cerberus is just KO'd and is heading straight for my trash pile. Now let's say that my opponent had more character on his board with which he can make attack with, and he's now attacking my leader with a 6k attack on a 5k defender. Well, my second defensive option is going to be to use counters. And just like Gigoro right here, you can see Gigoro has a counter of 1000 on the side. Well, you can take any cards in your hand which has a counter value and use it to boost the power of your own leader or character during the defending phase. Meaning that if I were to take this Victoria Sindri right here, which has a 2k counter, I can just add the 2k power to the 5k of Memoria and be at a 7k leader to defend against a 6k attacker, which makes a successful defense. It is also important to note that since we're talking about counter, they don't just come as value added by character cards from your hands, because events come in different shapes and forms, and one of the most prominent ones is actually counters. And it's fairly easy to spot them because they will have the counter mention on the effect instead of main. This right here is a keyword that specifies that this card can be played during your opponent's turn. That being said, since this is an event, you need to be able to pay the cost in Dawn from your own cost area if you want to play this card as a counter to your opponent's attack. So let's assume I have 3 Dawn active on my field, my opponent is declaring an attack. I can totally pay the 3 costs for this event and play this as a counter. Now, sadly for us, he has yet another attacker, a 5k this time, which is attacking into my leader. Well, I do not have any more counter in my hand and I have no blocker on the board. So sadly for me, I have to take the L and just take 1 life to add to my hand. But there is actually possibilities to draw cards from your life with a trigger effect. And trigger, this little mention right here in yellow and black. And you can see this is an event card with an effect, a main effect right here, which is give up to one of your opponent's character -5 cost during this turn. And you can see that the effect in the trigger is vastly different. It's actually KO up to one of your opponent's character with a cost of 3 or less. And so I know that on my opponent's board, there's this little character which is a cost of 3 or less, and that character is just, it's bothering me and I want him gone. I trigger. This card is moving from my life to my hands, and during that movement, I can activate the trigger. So I choose to do so, and I just apply the effect, KO my opponent's card, and then that card which has the trigger goes to the trash pile. But do note that triggering with a card from your life is actually an optional step. You do not need to activate trigger every time you see them. I could have just take this card into my hand and use it at a later time, but using the main effect instead of the trigger. Now, if we keep the situation of being the second player here in this match, I'm gonna take one card more, and I'm gonna take 2 dawns more. So we are at the second turn of me being the second player of this match, and first turn I actually played a Cerberus. And Cerberus is actually a fairly easy card. This is just a blocker. And the blocker is just a card that is able to divert an opponent's attack towards this specific target. Now it is worth going and check kind of every keyword that you can find, but this is usually mentioned on the card in parentheses. So if you take a look at Cerberus, after your opponent declares an attack, you may rest this card and make it the new target of the attack. That is what blockers mean. Your opponent is trying to attack you, you rest this card and say, I'm blocking your attack with this card, being the new target of the attack. But there is actually a big variety of effects that are gonna affect the game in one way or another. And if we take, for instance, Rob Lucci over here, his effect is actually on play. So that means that you can play this card and you activate the effect. But some of them are a bit more specific. Let's take, for instance, Thriller Back here, which is a stage, which you can see by dimension stage here, as well as the border, which is a different color. And this stage actually has the activate main mention, as well as a little 1 in a circle. And this one means that you need to pay in order to activate the effect. So let's say that I'm paying 1 to play Thriller Back from my hands in the stage area. Now I can use the activate main, and activate main means that you activate the effect during your main phase. So this is a card that I can activate during my main phase, and I need to pay 1, so I need to pick another dawn and rest it in my cost area in order to activate the effect. And so by activating the effect, I'm just gonna apply whatever is written on the card, which is you may rest this stage if your leader has a Thriller-back pirate, which my leader does because it's a Gecko Moria. I can play up to 1 Thriller-back pirate type character card with a cost of 2 or less from your trash rested. So I am gonna trick a bit here, and I've filled up my trash, which is right behind my face here, over there. It's right behind there. It's an area just right below the deck. I've inputted 3 cards in there because let's say I activate my stage. So I rest the card, just like it says on the card, I rest this stage. And I'm able to play up to 1 Thriller-back pirate from my trash with a cost of 2 or less rested on the board. So if we look at my trash, I have 3 cards, and Tsuru, for instance, I cannot target because she's not a Thriller-back pirate. She's actually a navy, so she's a no-go. I can only play Victoria Sindri or Jigoro of the Wind, and that's because there are 2 or less. Let's say I have a Perona in my trash, I cannot get it back with this. I'm playing using the effect of Thriller-back the stage, so I'm just gonna take Jigoro of the Wind and play it rested on my board. And before we go any further, yes, there is a limitation as to how many characters you can have, and that limitation is 5. If you have 5 cards on your character area, 5 characters played on your field, and you want to play 1 character more, you need to discard yourself one of your character and put it in the trash. So that actually was an activate main with a cost attached to it, but sometimes the cost is a bit different. And for this, we're gonna assume that I did not play this because I'm actually gonna need the dawn for this. So I'm gonna put my hand over on the side. And if we take a look at my leader, which is Moria, his effect is actually a dawn X1 when attacking and a little bubble with a 2 in it. Now, this is gonna teach us dawns movements, because dawns, when they are active on your board, meaning again, being vertically oriented, you can actually freely take any dawn that you have that is active and move them on your board and give them to any character on the board. So I could potentially do this. And what that does is actually that you can see your turn plus 1,000 on every don. And that is because once you give a don to a character or your leader, that specific leader or character is gonna gain plus 1,000 power. So right now my Moria is 6k power and my Cerberus is 3k power. So now I have fulfilled for Moria the Don X1 part of his effect. Now the second part is actually a when attacking. So I need to declare an attack with Moria and I rest him sideways to indicate so. Now, as I mentioned previously, there is also a cost attached to it, which is of 2 Don that I need to rest from my cost area in order to activate the effect. And that is how you activate a Don X effect. And I'm gonna make a quick parenthesis here to teach you the second reading for effects cost. That reading is gonna be specifically found mostly for purple. That is gonna be like you can see on this iceberg alternate art here, which is a leader. You see a Don minus plus a number right on the card. So activate main Don -1. And what that actually means is that if I have that leader right here and I want to activate main his effect, I need to take a Don from my field, whichever one I want, and put it back into my Don deck. That is a Don minus effect. Wow, well, now we're further along in the game. You can see that there is no Don deck anymore because all of my Dons have been drawn out. I'm down to my last life and I have 4 characters on the board. This is my opponent's turn, by the way, and you can see I have no blocker on the board. And he just declared an attack of a whopping 12k on my leader. I only have a 2k in my hand. Well, looks like I lost and I have to take the last life. And there is even no trigger in that. So I guess I just lost. Well, not really, because the rules of the game are that you actually need to deal 1 damage more than the life of any players in order to win the game. So even though I was down to my last life, my opponents need to be able to deal 1 damage more than that in order to win. And lucky for me, that was his last attack. So he's passing turn and now this is mine. So I'm quickly gonna go through my refresh phase and just put everything back to normal. And my opponent actually has no blockers on the field and only 1 card in hand. And he is also just like me at his last life. So that means I have to deal 2 damage in order to win. That's gonna be easy with the boards that I have. So I'm just gonna make a 10k attack with my Moria, and that attack is just gonna go through. So now my opponent has no life left, and I need to deal 1 more damage. So I'm just gonna go all in with my leader, and I win. Now, of course, this was just an example of how a game might go in order to teach you all the rules about the game that you need in order to play. There is much more to it though, and I highly encourage anyone who's looking into getting into the game to read the official rule that is available on the official website of the game. And with that said, if this video has been helpful to you, please leave a like. And also, if you have a friend who's looking into the game, make sure to share this video so he too can learn how to play. And even though you just learned how to play, you might not have any cards to play the game. So make sure to subscribe to the channel because our next video is going to be about where to buy the game. And in the meantime, if you want to be a bit ahead of the curve, I suggest those 2 videos that I kept for you on the side.